Hey everyone, welcome back. It's been a while, but we're here with another video. IRL schedule's been super busy lately, and the Incarnon weapons honestly were a real piece of work to cover. Anyways, today we're looking at a cool Nekros build. This is a true Necromancer Nekros build that focuses around his fourth ability, Shadows of the Dead. Treated as a spiritual successor to the original iteration made by my friend Nash Prime over a year and a half ago in December 2020 when Deimos Arcana came out. That was the first time this type of build was possible. We will be using his shadows to DPS for us. Your job? On-field DPS support as an enabler for them, because this build scales. Once you got your shadows set up, feel free to enjoy the show. The further you go, the stronger they get, and the less maintenance they need. And unlike completely AFK setups like Zaku turrets or Wu clone, you still have some actual things to do, so the build doesn't become completely brain dead. The main culprit behind this setup? It's still Theorem Infection and the Residual Arcanes from the Deimos Arcana update back in late 2020. But many other things have changed since then. In fact, you'll also get a sneak peek of some mechanics in this video for a future topic. The biggest change since Nash's video is that the build is much easier to run now. DE updated all legacy arcanes before the Angels of Zariman. Previously, arcanes had 3 stats: a proc chance, a buff value, and a duration. All 3 stats used to scale with arcane rank, meaning lower ranks were near useless. Now, DE has retconned all the old arcanes so that the only stat that scales is the buff value. All arcanes now have the full proc chance and full duration of a max rank arcane, so you will be able to use this setup even if you do not have rank 5 arcanes of what I use today. And because this build scales infinitely, it also means the longer you go, the less difference there will be between rank 0 and rank 5 setups. Why is this? Because this build relies on Shadows DPS. Your Specters scale like enemies, meaning their attack power scales much faster than their health and armor, to the point that it even starts outscaling EHP. They will eventually get so strong that even buffless, they will kill enemies when you're fighting level 5000s, which is what Nash originally showed. But our goal today is to make them shred enemies even at base steel path, where their attack scaling has yet to outscale their EHP. This way you will get the same feel of the sheer firepower at level 5000 without having to go to level 5000. This is where our Residual Arcanes come in. They create elemental auras for us to stand in when we get Kitgun kills. These elemental auras determine what elemental damage buff the Theorem Infection Arcane will give to our shadows. They can also combine elements if you use multiple residuals. Simply put, if we're fighting Grenier or Corrupted faction, we will use 2 Kitguns today to give our shadows Toxin and Electric to create corrosive damage buffs. If we're fighting Infested, you can give them Heat and Toxin to make gas. Or if it's Corpus, you only need 1 Kitgun to give them Toxin. And yes, the double residual setup with 2 Kitguns will proc 2 separate elemental buffs for Theorem Infection, meaning your shadows will get 720% bonus damage instead of just 360. Now, I mentioned DE buffs at the start, right? This is where it begins. Previously, the radius of Residual Arcanes were all over the place, and some were awkwardly small. They also had super trash proc chance at rank 0 with just 5% and lasting 3 seconds. All ranks now have 20% proc chance, and the pool they create for you stand in lasts 12 seconds with a 9 meter radius for all of them. And we also now have Weapon Arcane, so it's much easier to kill on steel path. Here is the best part though you may not know about Theorem Infection. Your shadows snapshot the buff on cast. So if you cast your shadows when you have the max 15 stacks Toxin for 360% Toxin damage, your shadows will now forever have that 360% Toxin damage buff until they die or despawn, even if your Theorem Infection buff runs out. Think of the buff duration being a window where you can apply the buff to your shadows rather than the duration of the damage buff itself. Theorem Infection is only applied on cast. This is extremely important because recasts also count. If you recast shadows while you have a Toxin buff from an infection that is weaker than the 360% you previously had, it will snapshot the new, weaker Toxin buff. It does not take the strongest buff, but rather the newest buff. This is also where things get slightly more complicated. Theorem Infection also tracks elemental buffs separately, so if you recast shadows with a weaker Toxin buff, it will replace your old Toxin buff with a weaker new one. But what if you switch to your second Kitgun with Residual Shock and create electric elemental pools? Standing in it will charge Theorem with electric stacks instead. What happens if you recast Shadows now? This is the magic. It will not remove the Toxin buff, and instead now adds electric to them and also combines with the Toxin to make corrosive. You can also get gas for Infested by combining Toxin and Heat residuals, and Toxin obviously alone to deal with Corpus. This means elemental pools can only replace their own elements and cannot replace each other. In theory, this means a squad with 4 different residuals lets you stack all elements on your Specters if you stand in your teammates' residual elemental auras that you don't have on your weapons, but we're not gonna look into that today. Because Theorem Infection is only applied to your Shadows on cast, the correct process is to proc 1 residual aura and stand in it to get 15 times stacks, then cast Shadows. Then use your other Kitgun to create pools of the opposite element, stand in it to get a different 15 times stacks, and recast Shadows. This will apply 15 times Toxin and 15 times Electric stacks to your Shadows, which is how we get 30 stacks for 720% corrosive damage scaling. I would recommend proccing Electric first against Grenier and Corrupted because the status proc of Electric can crowd control enemies, whereas Toxin cannot. Likewise, for Infested, I would recommend Heat first before Toxin for the same reason. Alright, we finally understand how Theorem Infection and Residual Arcanes work. How about the Kitguns? My primary Kitgun is a Gaze, made with Tremor, Gaze, and Splat. Just make sure it's a crit stick. I'm building raw damage because we have a way to strip almost all armor, which will be more valuable than the roar that Nash used in his video. So I will even scale in endurance. We have pure corrosive since the heat slot is taken from Prime Shred, as the primary Gaze does not have chaining like the secondary version does, and we want to increase the crowd killing potential of this weapon. I would recommend using the 90-90 corrosive mods here, not the 60-60, since beams will already proc corrosive instantly, and our focus is more raw damage to kill faster to create pools. The rest is typical gun seal for 2 elemental stacks. This is enough to match Serration, but we also get 80% more status. Because this is a beam, their performance is quite similar with just 2 status effects, and you could honestly just run Amalgam Serration here instead, as Guncio is only giving us 160% base damage. Tactical Reload lets you instantly switch between your Kitguns to build elemental pools of the opposite type without having to reload. Deadhead is obvious since we're on a raw damage build, and we also get the bonus headshot multiplier and long-lasting stacks. We pick Residual Viremia for a primary because I intend to proc this one after the pistol. The pistol carries Residual Shock instead, which allows your Shadows to CC enemies. The pistol also scales better, so it is only natural to put the more useful Residual Arcane on it. Now, I have 2 pistol options to show you today. The first is the infinitely scaling Catch Moon. This is the one and done type of deal. You can either run this viral hemorrhage build or go pure hemorrhage. The Catch Moon pistol force procs impact on shots and shoots slow enough to benefit from Hemorrhage's 2x mod effect for a 70% chance to proc Slash. The only difference between the 2 builds is actually modding Viral, or slotting Hornet Strike or Rank 3 Gunslinger to stay under 2.5 fire rate, and Lethal Torrent for quality of life fire rate and base damage ramping. You could be bringing a Panzer on this setup, so even if you go pure Slash, there will still be Viral procs. It is the one I would recommend, and the Prime Bane is important on this build because it double dips and bleeds for 2.4 times more damage. Guncio on the pistol is much stronger than the primary I showed because we will proc these 3 statuses, and a 4th for Slash, meaning we get 480% base damage from this mod. I would also recommend slotting Lethal Momentum in the X-List to help with Catch Moon's falloff since the range is only 8 to 16 meters. You lose 94% damage at 16 meters, and the Force Impact proc for Hemorrhage only normally occurs in the first 9 meters. Projectile Flight Speed will let you extend both of these crucial values. Now, alternatively, you could run a Gaze pistol made with Splat and Ramble instead for easier crowd killing to create auras. I chose Ramble for the further range out to 38 meters since it was originally meant for Eidolon hunting. Feel free to run Haymaker or Love Tap for more DPS, but just keep in mind these 2 only have 22 and 25 meter range respectively. It does not have the infinite scaling of the Catch Moon setup since it's a raw damage build, but it might as well be with enough armor strip we'll be having on this setup. Because it has the chaining mechanic, we're only using it to create elemental pools. I chose not to slot Seeker for punch through on this weapon. This lets us slot primed heat, and we get to 4 different status effects for Guncio on this pistol to grant 480% base damage scaling. I chose to slot Galvanized Crosshairs here, but you can replace it with Prime Pistol Gambit if you don't want to aim at heads. It will still be well over 100% crits. Ejecta Magazine helps us reload when we pull out our Kitgun rifle, Residual Shock is once again the Residual Arcane of choice, and our first Kitgun to use against Grenier or Corrupted. For Infested, run Residual Boils instead. This is because electric and heat can crowd control enemies, unlike Residual Viremia on our primary. And now the next buff. With the Echoes update, we got a slew of new arcanes, including some new pistol ones like Cascadia Flare. This is a refreshable arcane that grants up to 480% base damage scaling, which is stronger than the traditional Merciless Deadhead and Dexterity ones that give 360% and also requires kills. This is the important part. Flares does not require kills, it just requires heat status procs. It's best used on guns that procs tons of status, but it's perfect for Gaze, not only because Gaze is a beam, but it also chains, meaning it will build heat stacks to max out the arcane instantly for that sweet 480% base damage if you slot heat on the weapon. There are other interesting uses for this arcane I will get into in a future video, but an on-demand 480 base damage is extremely nice for weapon scaling since you don't need kills. Being a Nekros, I brought a Glaive Prime for a tad bit of safety. This is a generic Glaive Prime heavy detonation build. Just keep in mind, you don't actually need to bring this because we have so many different ways to heal. The only reason for me to use this is Life Strike if my health gets too low since we're playing a shield gate setup today. A single heavy detonation will max out your HP no matter how low you are. Besides that, yes, this is an actually fully built Glaive Prime. If you aren't using Life Strike, you just replace this with Gladiator Might. Normally my Riven goes in the slot, but well, unless mandatory for the strat, using Rivens doesn't really make my build accessible to you guys, does it? Now, finally, that Nekros build. This is what we got. It looks somewhat similar to Nash's setup, but we got bonus duration for less maintenance on R4. This makes the HP naturally decay slower. At 155% duration, their HP only decays by 1.94% per second, or it takes 51.7 seconds for them to die naturally outside of incoming damage. Having Shadows die means longer cast animations. That's right, your 4 not only heals any existing shadows, but also has a shorter animation if you're already at max shadows. Spawning new shadows also means you need to reapply Theorem infection elements on them, which is annoying when it's just a few new shadows, therefore having some duration is massive quality of life. I do not build range on this Nekros since Pillage scales better off duration, Desecrate works well enough on neutral range, and the base range of Terrify is small enough you need quite a lot for it to be effective, as well as a slow augment to prevent them from running off too fast that uses a mod slot. It also doesn't strip enough armor to be worth it and is also an expensive shield gating ability. Pillage grants overshields, has much further effective range due to positive duration, up to 70 meters on this build if you let it come back naturally, only requires 400 strength to full strip unlike Terrify's 500, and doesn't care about Augur Set or Brief Respite since its purpose is both to strip armor and restore shields, so saving slots on a bloated Nekros build. Pillage is the reason why our shadows will also become strong enough to nearly one-shot enemies even at base steel path without having to cherry-pick napalms and other heavy units and not using roar. Against all factions, it will strip off nearly all armor and shield and multiplicatively stacks per cast. We have Molt Augmented, another new arcane with the Echoes update that grants up to a permanent 60% strength until you are killed. It requires 250 kills, but that really shouldn't take long in steel path. Remember, this is a Nekros build intended for shorter and longer steel path missions, but still focus around the survival or disruption game mode. Growing Power grants us another 25% strength, which should be super easy to proc with our Beam Kitguns or Catch Moon's Force Impact procs. Finally, we're also running the new Matarai 3.0 tree for Sling Strength. This grants us 40% more strength on all ability casts for 20 seconds. You just have to dash twice to proc it, and since it only lasts 20 seconds, we might as well pair it with Mega's Elevate, which heals our frame on transference, to counteract Despoil's health drain. This is on top of our Glaive Prime with Lifesteal, which is meant to deal with if we kill too many at once in a burst. Proccing Sling Strength also procs Power Transfer since we need to transfer it anyways. This will be our built-in natural talent that has equal uptime to our 40% strength buff. So if you play properly, you should always have it active. It will speed up your shadow cast animation a lot while saving a mod slot by not having to use natural talent. Let's look at the Nekros build again. The result of Growing Power, Multi Augmented, and Sling Strength means we're casting Pillage with 368% strength. This is a 92% armor and shield strip. At lower steel path levels, this is more than enough for your shadows to obliterate all opposition. And at higher levels, the damage repping will outscale EHP and even 8% armor left is fine. Pillage also stacks multiplicatively, so if you did end up casting it twice on the same enemies, they would only have 0.64% armor left. Pillage can also strip Acolyte armor after the shield is removed, so double casting it should either result in a full strip, or 0.64% armor remaining and now your shadows can kill the Acolyte for you. I don't know if it rounds down for them or not though. We are also using the Despoil Augment to take pressure off our energy economy, meaning we're able to spam Pillage as much as needed to shield gate properly with Prime Flow for 531 energy. Prime Sure-Footed is pretty self-explanatory, and we're also running Equilibrium since the spoil will spawn so many health and energy orbs regardless. We also have Rolling Guard, which is crucial in any standard shield gate build to give us a window to regenerate our shields. This will also be paired with our Panzer Pet, which will proc viral for us using viral quills. This is treated like Sarin Spores and spreads if you damage the enemy affected. Well, even better, because while our shadows don't have the best AI, you bet they will be shooting all over the place. They have literal aimbot, so it is guaranteed the viral quilled enemies will be shot, causing the spores to spread all over the room for max viral stacks, even though we didn't bring a primer. Every enemy tagged also counts as a pet assist, which will proc Synth Deconstruct for 25% chance to proc health orbs. This is a separate proc from Despoil and thus means we can double dip orb spawns. Synth Fiber lets us pick up health orbs even at full HP, so you should never run out, as Equilibrium will also convert this into energy. Monitor so your cat can save you if you die, and Panzer Devolution give it infinite lives. Attack Assault can proc even off your cat's suicide attempts to block its death 60% of the time, allowing Martyr to essentially gain multiple charges, and then your typical radar and vacuum. There you go, your updated Shadows of the Dead Nekros. This is the strongest iteration of Nekros' undead army we've ever had, and it's awesome we can finally now bring the limitless attack scaling at higher levels of its shadows even to base steel path. A truly infinitely effective and infinitely scaling build. If DE fixes the transference delay in the future like they're working on, you can actually also slot Magus Anomaly instead of Lockdown here. Spamming transference once patched will let you pull enemies in together, letting your shadows kill them more easily by bringing them within line of sight and all in one place. Thanks again, Nash, for the inspiration and the original idea. I hope I made you proud with this one. What did you think? If this is your first time watching, feel free to leave a like or better yet subscribe. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. 79.5% of you are not subscribed. I'm trying my best to get you new information out always as soon as possible, like I've done with the Echoes of Zariman update. Stick around if you want to see interesting memes and builds on a nearly daily basis. Don't want to miss out on any of that, do you? That'll be it for this video. Thank you all for watching, and see you all next time.